this week. We're wrapping up our study of the books, the epistles of John. So we're going to do 3rd John today, the letter to Gaius. And he talks about hospitality. I was thinking of different times I've had hospitality in my life, and maybe some weird moments in hospitality, or differences, or things that I thought were hospitality but weren't. I got to start out with a Ginny story, our big giant dog. Anytime, we just had my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, Tam and Nate, Deb's sister and her husband, and Nate is one of my best friends, love it when they come over. Anyway, they came over. Ginny loses her mind when Tam comes over, when Deb's sister comes over. I mean, she gets excited when anybody comes over. If you've been to her house, you know Ginny is excited when you show up. But she literally runs around the house. She has to be let out the back door, and then runs around the backyard and comes back in, because I think there's such similarity between Deb and her sister and Deb is Ginny's favorite person in the whole world, that it's like two of Deb, and her tiny little walnut brain cannot comprehend the joy that she's experiencing. I have had some times where I thought it was going to be hospitable, where I thought I was being invited in. Had a buddy from college. We had been out of college for a few years, and he reached out, and we weren't that close of friends, but we were friends-ish. And he's like, hey, we'd love to have you and Deb come over for dinner. And I was like, that's great. And at the very end of this invitation said, and also, hey, bring your financial statement. And it's like, oh, that's a weird, never had that happen. And Deb, who's smarter than I am, is like, they're pitching financial services. She goes, I ain't going. But I feel guilty. So I'm like, okay, I'll show up. Deb, and he was very insistent Deb be there, and I was like, well, she's just not coming. And so finally I had to say, like, hey, I'm not buying anything, I'm not signing up for any, but if you want to practice your pitch, I'll be glad to sit through it. It's so disappointing. I liked this guy, but we never hung out again after that, because I just felt so used, right? You go over to and again, maybe you've been involved in these things, and they're not inherently evil, but I think when you use friendships that way, if you've ever gone to somebody's house and suddenly the flip chart comes out, maybe I'm going to back away from that. I did have one that turned out great that wasn't what I thought. A friend of mine invited me, a guy named Dave. A friend of mine named Dave was like, hey, let's go get lunch. This is when I worked at the financial place down in Bremerton. So I'd asked for some time off. This guy wanted to get lunch. We got lunch. And he goes, let's meet at Famous Dave's. And we went to Famous Dave's, and they used to have Dave Day at Famous Dave's, where anybody named Dave ate free. I didn't know this. He was like, surprise, it's on Dave. And I was like, this actually rocks. He wasn't trying to sell me or anything. He was just like, I didn't want you to miss out on free barbecue. It helped me rethink hospitality. And we'll get back to that. But John is talking about, or the elder, the pastor is talking about that. So we'll start with the salutation. How does he open up this letter? He says here in the salutation, this letter is, I got to make the font bigger. Hold on. I broke my glasses this morning. So let's go to 225's font. It's one word per page. I'll be doing a lot of scrolling this morning. This letter is from John the elder. I'm writing to Gaius, my friend, whom I love in the truth. Dear friend, I hope all is well with you, and that you are as healthy in body as you are strong in spirit. Some of the traveling preachers recently returned and made me very happy by telling me about your faithfulness and that you are living according to the truth. I could have no greater joy than to hear that my children are following the truth. We talked a little bit about this last week. How cool it is when somebody, especially if you have adult kids or any kids, when someone comes to you and says, hey, I met one of your kids and they're great. Right? That is fantastic. I love that. And John's saying kind of the same thing, but I love, though, that he, first of all, has this is one of those that's a real postcard. We talked about this. The John 2 and 3 are real letters, like they weren't meant to be passed around churches necessarily. This one is specifically not just to a church, not just to a group. This is to a dude. He's like, this is someone who's just his friend. Genuine affection, genuine friendship. He's not pasting anything on. There's not an agenda. I mean, there is a little bit, but just like you would have with a friend who's telling some truth. He has genuine affection between the pastor, the elder, and Gaius. And he says, I've been praying for you. I'm praying for good. I want good for you on every level. This is important, though. I love that this is one of the times that this solidifies, I think, a theme throughout Scripture. He wants good for him on all levels, body, soul, and spirit. He's like, hey, I know you're spiritually trying. I know you're doing good. I also hope, hey, you're feeling good. I hope you're well, that your body is doing, that you're not sick, that you're growing, that you're feeling good. I want you to experience wholeness on every level. Not just spiritually, but in everyday life. Eugene Peterson, I use a lot of Eugene Peterson in this one. I love the way he described this book. He's like, hey, I want you to experience health. I want you to experience joy. I want you to experience good in everyday life, not just your church life. Not just your spiritual life. And it's going to make me glad. It makes me glad when I hear good reports that you're doing well. Not just self-reporting. I also think it's interesting that he's saying, not just that you told me you're doing good, but I have it on good authority. People who actually were there, who saw how you functioned, and they came back and said, yeah, he's really doing it. He's really living the good life. Not just saying he's good, not just preaching good, not just believing good. He's living it out, and we observed it. I love that. So that's the difference. So that's how we start. What a great way to start. Wouldn't you like to get that letter from somebody? Man, I hope you're doing good, body, soul, and spirit. And by the way, I hear you rock. That's not exactly. That's probably the Dave translation there. But so the first little chunk is this commendation of Gaius. Commendation of this guy. He says, dear friend, you are being faithful to God when you care for the traveling teachers who pass through, even though they're strangers to you. They have told the church here of your loving friendship. Please continue providing for such teachers in a manner that pleases God. For we are traveling for the Lord, and they accept nothing from the people who are not believers. So we ourselves should support them so we can be their partners as they teach the truth. A couple of the people studying this said it's not just traveling preachers, like we think of like traveling evangelists, and there's probably that, but they're saying that there's also just people who were believers traveling through who were doing God's work. So it didn't necessarily always mean they had the tag, like authority. But they're just people who were servants of God traveling from place to place. And Gaius made hospitality a habit. It was part of their life. They were known for it. When we extend hospitality to others, even if they're strangers, we make our faith visible. So yes, start with fellow believers, but especially giving hospitality to strangers. This is going to be a theme today. Buckle up. And that's not easy. There are personalities that are easier with strangers. We've probably all known somebody like that you stop and get gas and you're in the car, and by the time you're done going in and getting your Slim Jim and Sprite, that they have made a best friend, Dave, Andrea, and I. I'm not saying anybody. I don't want you to embarrass anybody. Usually with Dave, though, it'll be they've found someone in common that they know. Right? But we've known people. My dad was like that. We used to die on vacations because my dad would want to stop in tiny little diners. He'd be like, there's a perfectly good McDonald's right across the street. Why are we stopping at Chuck's Diner and Meat Slab? And why do we got to go in there? And he'd go in there. Sorry, not just you, Chuck. In general, Chuck. This is a general Chuck. Theoretical Chuck.
We got coupons.
Right. But he would by then get to know the waitress, and by the end they'd be inviting him back to their house, and we're like, we just want to go to McDonald's. Right? There are people who are good at that. But I love this idea that it was especially important to give hospitality to give care, to give love, to have our faith lived out in front of strangers. And that's not easy. And then it was reported back, and this was such a great example to not just the people there, but to the church that the elder that John was talking about, where he was at. Like, not only have you been doing good up there, but it has ripple effects down here. We hear about it, and we get to be part of that. You're supporting the ministry of those people going through. We get to support it. It's helping us be better. It is a sign of not just friendship, but of unity. When we offer hospitality, we're increasing our unity, and we're increasing unity of the fellowship. It is love shown in a very practical and obvious way. You can't hide it, right? You don't have to explain or offer theology when we give people genuine care and hospitality. We don't have to explain to them, hey, this is loving you. We want to take care of you. We want to give you, basically when we talk about it in the ancient days, it was a meal, a bed, and a roof. And when you're providing for that to somebody, especially a stranger in those days, and even today, when you're providing that, you don't have to say, and by the way, this is loving. There's a lot of stuff that we say is loving that we have to say, oh, by the way I'm hurting you right now is really loving. Let me show you a verse that shows that to you. And again, there are times that, yes, we have to do painful things because we love somebody. I get it. I'm not saying that never happens. But this is so much easier. So much easier to just care for somebody. It's pleasing to God, and it reflects and resembles his way of loving us, providing actual, tangible care for friends and strangers that is unmistakable. And these travelers, these preachers, these people who are going around that were followers of Jesus, they were dependent on other followers of Jesus, Christians, for encouragement of the soul and help for the body, their physical needs. I like the fact that he makes this point. They weren't asking non-believers to help. And I think that's an important distinction. I think not because that help from non-believers would be unclean or something. It was like they're there, that's who they're there to help. They want to bring the good news to people who don't know Jesus. And we don't want to ask things from them. We don't want to take from the people we're trying to help. And I like that. They didn't want a barrier for non-followers, so that it was very clear they were there purely with a pure motive and a desire to help, not in a way to manipulate and get something from them. I love that. So powerful. They don't want to need anything from the people they're trying to reach. We need to make sure we're not manipulating others to expand our own agenda. So the idea is, hey, you're doing a good thing. God loves it that you're supporting these people so that they can remain pure and transparent in their work as they love people. They deserve that support. It pleases God in providing meals and a bed and a roof. And that helps us become companions in spreading the truth. I love that. And I know this group does it. Again, there's a little bit of preaching to the choir. This is a very giving, hospitable. In fact, such a small group today, it's a little bit like we can have a little family meeting about this. So I want to call us to a higher standard. I want to explain this. And mainly I want to call us to continue doing what we're doing and maybe improve it. Maybe find some ways to improve. But I know you're all doing that. And this is an ancient practice, not just in the New Testament, but throughout Christian history, up till about 1700. And then hospitality kind of got removed from the spiritual uses or the spiritual import. The ancient Christian morality of hospitality primarily was this idea of welcoming strangers and the vulnerable. And really up until the Middle Ages, the end of the Middle Ages, this was it was right up there with baptism and teaching and worshiping. It was one of the things as Christians they were expected to do. They were to care for widows and the poor and the prisoner and the immigrant and the afflicted. Especially, that's all kind of tied up in this word stranger. Some of it was practical. At the time, there's not like hotels, right? There's no like restaurants. You can't go in and find a Shoney's, right? Shoney's. Right? Travelers and immigrants depended on hospitality and provision from others for their basic needs. Meals, bed, roof. I'm sorry. Now I've got us all distracted thinking about Shoney's meals. Okay, think about that for a second. Now be done. Okay, come back. Everyone would eventually need that, by the way. Eventually, if you were ever going to travel, if you're ever going to be outside of your normal routine, you were going to need help from somebody to figure out along the way. And now again, there's all sorts of stuff, like if you had money, you could always do that. But most normal people, that's how you were provided for. Mary and Joseph and Jesus, for instance, right? They needed help. They needed hospitality. And hospitality didn't just mean providing those needs. It meant providing warmth, physical and spiritual, inviting somebody in. We need to be included. We need to feel welcomed. And Christianity, following Christ, involved the command to welcome outsiders in. We all know the pain of exclusion. Have you ever been to a high school cafeteria? That terror of walking into a new place. I gotta say, I hate it. Like, I'm a wuss sometimes. When I go to these conferences, especially now that Jim and I don't go together, when it's just me, going into the meal, especially most of the conferences, there's a bunch of tables, and it's a bunch of guys. And if I don't immediately see somebody I know, man, I got to tell you, I turn into a 16-year-old insecure kid. Like, can I sit here? And they're like, you? It never happens. I'm very charming. I think you forget that. But it's still scary. We want to be included, and not just on that surface level, but on a deep level of saying, you are welcome here regardless of what's going on. Exclusion causes deep, crippling pain that causes evil. Fear of exclusion causes us to withdraw from community, causes us to try and just escape the pain of life. It reinforces bias. It helps us be willing to, often in order to feel included, willing to reject and to act differently than our values that we believe in order to fit in. And it often causes us to lie so that we seem like we're more acceptable, to try and be included. It's a very common value. I mean, even the ancient Israelites saw themselves, one of the reasons this was such a powerful idea, they saw themselves as sojourners, right? They were outcasts. They were immigrants. They were wanderers. They were the strangers. God called them to offer hospitality like they had required, even to their, not just strangers, but to enemies. In most cultures, this was the norm for most of history. It was common to extend hospitality, but common to extend hospitality to the important or the wealthy. The Christian twist, the Christian change that happened in the early church was they were the only ones that were reaching out and seeking the poor and the marginalized, the vulnerable, and the stranger. The distinct Christian version, someone said, was to seek out and care for the poor and the most vulnerable. That was the weird part about the Christians. They didn't just find those who were influential, who could help them. They went out in the streets and found those who needed help, the poor, and those who weren't going to be able to pay them back. That's the principle that's laudable in hospitality. The tradition of hospitality and community, building community and offering hospitable places that we need to bring back. Offering dignity and power and recognition to strangers and people in the margins. I worked for a while for a financial company that helped people who were going through bankruptcy and foreclosure. And when I was a manager there, I told the people who were doing that counseling, look, you are probably the only person in this person's life who's not yelling at them. Give them some dignity in the middle of this horrible process. And it's going to be tough. That doesn't mean you don't tell them the truth. That doesn't mean you're not honest with them, but give them some dignity. And in fact, even if they're spun up and angry and lash out at you, we can absorb that. And I think as Christians we can do the same, right? We're loved by God. We're cared for by God. We've been offered hospitality by God. So just a few thoughts here on this idea of things that Gaius was commended for that we want to be commended for. There's a difference between entertainment and hospitality. And we need to be good at both, I think, and especially in our culture. And I started I was thinking of some people who are good at entertaining. And then I kind of felt bad because I started listing, and it's most people here. So I'm going to leave somebody out, but I know Lily is great at it. I mean, John is probably part of that somehow. You show up at least. Chuck and Trish are, Donette and John and Brent, David, all of you. I could go around. I feel bad if I'm not going to list you. You all are good at this. But you're good at not just entertaining, and you all do it in different ways. You can't leave Brent and Donette's house without playing some weird board game. Right? You all do it in different ways, but it's more than entertaining. Hospitality is more than that. I heard one person describe it as entertainment is you're never quite ready to have people in, and hospitality is you're always ready to have people in. And that doesn't mean cleaning your house. The best example I ever heard, there's a whole book I was reading about this several years ago. And I think, Chuck, you were in the small group when we went through that book about hospitality. And my favorite example was the mom whose house was always a mess. And she said, you know what, I've got little kids running around, but that's not going to be a barrier to me inviting, welcoming people into my home. And I just had this visceral like, ugh. I want to hide my things that aren't perfect. And I love that she was like, you know what? She told the story that we're just going to invite people in. Some of us who have huge dogs need to just be willing to invite people in, even if the dogs are going to bark. And you guys are all good at, I think you guys are already good at this, but I want to encourage you to stretch yourselves. Continue to offer warmth and invitation to people who might make us uncomfortable. The importance of inviting and welcoming into places of acceptance and safety. And making sure people know when they come in, we're not trying to recruit them for the church. We just want to care for them and love them. Right? There are antennas out there for that pretty huge these days. And they kind of think that we lose our testimony, I think, when they feel like we're just going to bring out the flip chart for our church. Right? And I'm so thankful that we have people, I will say this again, I can say this about every single one of you. I'm so thankful we have people in this church who are better at this than I am. And I want to encourage you to remember that the term has been given a really bad name. It's used as a punchline now. We talk about safe places, safe spaces. But I think we need to provide safe spaces for people where they can be vulnerable, and they can be poor, and they can be hurt, and they can be damaged, and we still welcome them in and love them. Remember, we're inviting them to his table, not just ours. I love this idea that hospitality is communal. It's not just on you. One of the ways that we can do this in our culture better is by doing it together. Right? There's some circumstances that I can cover better. There's some circumstances that you can cover better. And we can join our forces. That's some of the ways we keep it safe. That's some of the ways we can have some boundaries. That's some of the ways we can help people when we're not resourced to do that, either in stuff or in a personality or in emotion or in capability. I may not be ready or able at this point in my life to do some of it, but when we work together, we can meet a lot of needs. And not just stuff. Yes, providing meal and a bed and a roof, but we can also provide care and welcome and love. And when we do that together, it builds our community. When we are a group that is, one of the pieces to be able to be hospitable is we need to be people of gratitude. The thing that motivates hospitality is gratitude. We understand how well we've been cared for, and it frees us up to care for others. We want to see those on the margins just like Jesus does, to care for them. That we realize we are cared enough that we don't need to hold on to our stuff so tightly and invite people in. And we can care for them body and soul. So we want to make not just our homes, but our communal place, our church, as a place where we are welcoming and accepting people into a place of protection and dignity and security and rest and provision, and where we are helping people as a team. We give care and aid. On the opposite end of this, and the second part of it here, is the condemnation of Diotrephes. I looked it up even this week and practiced it. We're just going to call him Diotrephes. I even went to YouTube and had a guy say it for me in the original language. And he says, I wrote to the church about this, but this guy who loves to be the leader refused to have anything to do with us. And when I came, I will report to you some of the things he's doing and the evil accusations he's making against us. Not only does he refuse to welcome traveling teachers, but he also tells others not to help them. And even when they do, he puts them out of the church. My dear friend, don't let this bad example influence you. Follow what's good. Remember that those who do good prove that they are God's children, and those who do evil prove that they are not of God. I love this point, that he's like, hey, look out for this guy. He likes being in charge. He wants to be first, and he wants to be the decider. He's full of personal ambition, to the point where he's ignored the counsel of the elders. They're like, he didn't want to listen to us. When you have the Apostle John giving you advice, shush and listen. Right? No. He's not listening to them. And in fact, he denigrates them. He slanders them. He says it's bad advice. I got to admit, I've grown to hate leadership principles in the church. For so many years, especially as a young man, I would go to read books and talk about leadership. And sadly, most of them, there's some great stuff in there, I get it. But they would also kind of be interwoven with kind of business and political and cultural standards for being in charge. Kind of some type A business model, the idea of how to be more efficient and how to get people to do what you want them to do rather than care for people. I am not the best preacher. Trust me, if any of you have ever listened to another preacher, you know that already. I feel like in order for me to earn the right to talk to you, I need to care about you. I don't do that always perfectly. But I always feel like that's how I'm doing. I'm not going to get you to want to listen to me because every week it's something pithy and clever and winsome. That you go, wow, that was not only profound, but it was profoundly given. And I think I spent so much time trying to learn to be a leader, capital L, rather than loving people and lead by caring. And worried about being in charge, worrying about being in the leadership role, rather than just worrying about caring for people. There's a youth group organization across the country that they actually teach this, that they call it the leadership potential, that they go into high schools and they target the popular kids and create programs based on what those kids like, and they will bring in other kids. And I get it if you're trying to grow a youth group. But that kind of leaves out the kids who play French horn, the kids who play Dungeons and Dragons, and the kids who don't like to go out of the house, and the kids who like musical theater, right? Playing flag football afterwards is great for a good chunk, but we want to cover all of those kids. Let's not target those. Let's not worry about being in charge, and especially some red flags. If someone is making accusations, if there's accusations, we need to listen to them. But if the accusation is just to solidify power, if it's constantly denigrating and attacking those that they see in competition, be wary of that. Anyone whose main way of being a leader is to denigrate somebody else, ask some questions. And believe me, I get the irony of me saying, be wary of somebody who's putting down another leader when I'm talking about ways to evaluate other leaders. But I think primarily we need to be unified and caring and open and listen to the correction of others. But the big red flag is not necessarily bad leadership. The big red flag is the lack of hospitality. Not only is he not helping people, not only is he not offering basic needs to people who need it, he's actually telling other people that that's evil. You caring for somebody, you having love for somebody in a practical way, you inviting someone in and somebody who needs some help, that's evil, and so much that he's saying, I don't do it, you shouldn't do it, and if you do it, you're not a part of our group. That's the evil. Calling people out for wanting to practically care for others? For loving too much? For showing empathy? For embracing those who need help? Rather than caring for ourselves and making sure we're secure? That's inhospitable. That's about making sure we're secure and safe and comfortable rather than about caring for others the way Christ has called us to do. John, I love how John's like, the end of this is pretty simple. Yeah, don't be like that. That's basically what he's trying to do. Yeah, don't do that. Don't let that be an influence on you. Don't be like that. He's going to say a bunch of bad stuff about me. I'll come and explain that to you face to face, but trust me. If you're doing good work, that's of God. If you're not loving people, that's not of God. That's basically how he ends it. I love, again, all of these, right? Again, with the false leaders. John has spent a lot of time. He's the oldest apostle, right? He's finally writing this thing. He's like, by now, all these other false ideas have come out, and we need to attack them. This is a huge one, right? The final one was like, yeah, people who are not loving people, not being hospitable, not caring for people, and even if they're denigrating those who are trying it, don't be like that. Don't be inhospitable. Wherever you're at, you can be hospitable. Don't commit the sin of not caring. And he ends this by saying, in his farewell, everyone speaks highly of Demetrius, as does the truth itself. We ourselves can say the same for him, and you know we speak the truth. I think Demetrius, by the way, is the guy who was the traveling preacher. I think that's what most of the consensus is. They think that's who Gaius was taking care of. I have so much more to say to you, but I don't want to write it with pen and ink, for I hope to see you soon, and then we'll talk face to face, we'll Zoom or something. Peace be with you. Your friends here send your greetings. Please give my personal greetings to each of our friends there. I love this. He's like, hey, don't be like that guy. Don't be inhospitable. Be like Demetrius. Be like him. He's working hard and loves people. He lives what he teaches. Everybody knows it. Be like that guy. He's like, I can't wait to come up and resume our friendship. Sit down and have some hospitality. To use your hospitality and be there with you and enjoy our time together. Face to face, long conversation involving listening and talking and doing and caring. And also, I'm working on a new series from just this ending this week. This struck me hard. He says, also, I want you to live in peace. Hey man, I hope you have a peaceful life. It's got me thinking, what does Christian peace really mean? It doesn't always mean lack of conflict. Because he's talking about conflict. He's like, you're going to have conflict. You got stuff going on. I know it. But I want you to be at peace. And I feel like God calls us to that. We'll be talking more. You may hear that after Easter at some point. I'll leave with this illustration and then we're done. I was thinking about the best examples of hospitality. And I could probably go through this room and point to times that you've been hospitable to me. Giving and caring and loving and inviting and warm and welcoming. And not only to me, but I've observed you do it to other people. So this is a little weird. If you feel attacked, don't be. I just want to encourage you to keep at it. And maybe broaden your horizons a little bit. Maybe seek out a widow, the poor, an afflicted, a prisoner, a migrant, somebody who needs help. Keep our eyes open for those who need some. When I was in Bangladesh, Deb's parents were missionaries in Bangladesh for years. I went and visited once, and when I got off the airplane, I was the picture. If you looked in the dictionary for culture shock, it was a picture of me doing this. Right? It was nothing I was used to. But while we were there, we had two different times that Bengali families invited us in. One was Deb's parents' landlord. Very wealthy guy. And they invited us to eat at their home. We went to this beautiful home. Well appointed. All sorts of servants. And they provided us a meal. And the culture there was, if you invite somebody over, you feed them, but you don't eat with them. They would talk to us and engage with us, but they wouldn't eat with us. They would serve us and we'd eat. And an amazing meal, unbelievable Bengali food, and charming guy, charming family. They provided everything. It was so nice. Beautiful home, actual air conditioning, which was rare. Just a great time. We then went to we went to Malamgat, was a missionary hospital out of the jungle. And a girl who knew Deb when she was growing up, they were friends when Deb was little on the mission field. She's now married. They invited us to their hut. Tiny little room. I think there was 2 rooms. Provided us a meal. We realized when we came, everywhere we went, we couldn't drink the water. They just had water from wherever they got it. So we had one bottle like this for all 4 of us. They did the same thing. They served us and sat around on chairs around the outside of that room and talked to us. We had a delightful time. Amazing meal. And so incredibly kind. And as we're there, I'm realizing the amount of food they're bringing out is probably this family's food for the week. It was also so hot, I thought my stomach would explode. But so kind. There was equal warmth and care and invitation and hospitality at both of those homes. And I've always remembered that it doesn't matter how much I have, or how nice it is, or how appointed it is, it's the spirit that it was given. And both of those families gave with both hands and a full heart. It was delightful. I will give extra points to the poorer family, though. Later that night, the husband shows up, and he has a bunch of little tiny bananas. And he says, we just sat down and ate. And because my wife was trying to show off a little bit, and used so much spice that we thought it was too hot. So here are these bananas. This will help your stomach tonight. Natural antacids. It was amazing. Thought of it, walked through the night to bring those to us because he was like, oh no. This white dude is not going to make it. Such great hospitality. Let us be people who are showing care for the stranger, for the vulnerable, for the prisoner, for the widow, and for the poor. Let's pray. God, thank you that you are hospitable to us, that you have welcomed us into your family, that you provide things even when we're not grateful and undeserving. You expect nothing in return but our love, and because you loved us first. God, help us to learn how to do that in every way, body, soul, and spirit. To offer warmth, safety, acceptance to people as we offer them a meal and a bed and a roof. God, thank you for the example of these people right here. And help us to find ways to not only continue to do that better, but to pass that on to others around us. God, help us to be an example in this community of people who will do everything we can to care for somebody, regardless of their station. Thank you that you've done that for us. We love you and we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. 1 Peter 4:9, most important of all, continue to show deep love for each other, for love covers a multitude of sins. Cheerfully share your home with those who need a meal or a place to stay. May we be people who gladly and with a keen awareness of God's care and love for us seek to offer safety, provision, and rest for the most vulnerable strangers in our community so they can be loved and find grace from God. Thank you so much, and we will see you next week. Blessings.